inflation is soaring. In the United States, since prices started spiking in early 2021, food inflation has surged 22%. Eggs are up 87%. Auto insurance has soared nearly 47%, and gasoline is up 16%. Generally speaking, most people have a negative impression of inflation. Inflation is associated with rising prices, currency depreciation, income pressure, and tragic events. However, is inflation always detrimental to everyone? Can inflation potentially benefit some in our society?
Now let's imagine a scenario. Lynn borrowed $1,000 from Luna at an interest rate of 5% per year for 1 year, which means that Lynn will pay back Luna $1,050 after 1 year. Let's say that we experience a 3% inflation during the year, which means that an item worth $1,000 when Lynn borrowed the money will be worth $1,030 when Lynn returns the money along with the interest. Therefore, even if Luna is supposed to gain $50 out of the deal, the $50 interest that she received is partially offset by an overall increase in price levels throughout the society. In terms of purchasing power, Luna only received $20 in interest. In other words, even if the nominal interest rate is 5%, the real interest rate is 2%. Lynn benefited by paying less real interest.
What do you mean by nominal and real interest rates, you may ask? The nominal interest rate, well, it's the nominal interest rate. It has not been adjusted for inflation. In real life, the interest rates for bank deposits, loans, and credit card payments are generally nominal interest rates. In contrast, the real interest rate is the actual interest rate. The actual interest rate here refers to the interest rate that takes into account how the value of the interest changes given inflation. In the scenario we just discussed, it is obvious that the nominal interest rate is 5% and the real interest rate is 2%. But what is the relationship between inflation rate, nominal interest rate, and real interest rate? That's where the Fisher effect comes in. The Fisher effect is an economic hypothesis developed by economist Avery Fisher that explains the relationship between inflation and real and nominal interest rates. According to the Fisher effect, nominal interest rate equals real interest rate plus expected inflation rate. This is how people can benefit from inflation.
Let's return to the previous scenario. Lynn borrowed $1,000 from Luna at an interest rate of 5% per year. Over the year, the inflation happens to be 3%, so Lynn paid only 2% of real interest, thus getting a bonus out of the deal. In the previous example, Luna didn't consider the potential impact of inflation on interest. Obviously, in the real world, people are smarter. When bankers lend money, they would have a real interest rate that they want to gain out of the deal in their mind. Then, to offset inflation, they would add the inflation rate onto the real interest rate to get the nominal interest rate that they'll actually charge. Of course, they can't know the exact inflation rate in advance, so they can only go with a predicted inflation rate. Consequently, if inflation is higher than expected, the real interest rate will be lower, and the banker will be at a loss because they receive less real interest. In contrast, if inflation is lower than expected, the real interest rate will be higher, and the banker will be at the benefit because they receive more real interest. The next time Luna lends money to Lynn, Luna becomes smarter with the knowledge of the Fisher effect in mind. She wants to get 5% real interest from the deal, and she forecasts the inflation rate to be at 3%. So, Luna would offer Lynn an 8% interest rate, considering inflation. If the inflation rate is higher than the expected 3%, say 4%, Luna would only get 4% real interest rate, being at a loss. If the inflation rate is lower than the expected 3%, say 2%, Luna would get 6% real interest rate, being at an advantage. Let's generalize. In our world, Lynn would be the borrower and Luna would be the lender. If unexpected inflation occurs, the borrower will benefit. Conversely, if the actual inflation rate is lower than expected, the lender will benefit. Turns out, inflation might not be as bad of a thing as you might have thought.